Okay, so just briefly to go through what we think should be the future, and to just try to correct an error that we made. Somehow, this very, very important logo of the German Seafood Processor Association was left out of this this list. And this was a very, very bad for us, because they're paying for this meeting. Not only their partners, but they're paying for this meeting. And of all the people that we could forget their logo, it was them. So, you know, Murphy's Law, what can I say? So to reward them, we will change our DIVERSIFY logo to this one now. For the next project. Okay, so what I asked the species leaders, sorry, why is it end? What I asked the species leaders to do in preparation for this presentation, which is not my presentation, it belongs to the species leaders, is to come up with 1 or 2 slides of what is the new bottlenecks that they see, in a way to present this to everybody and have a chance also from the people from the Commission, from the Aquaculture Advisory Council, from the EAT, from FEAB, and all the people that we invited to just interact with us, because what we want to come up with in the next few months is a proposal of, let's call it unofficially DIVERSIFY 2, or what we think we should tell the Commission that they need to promote in the future. Maybe a DIVERSIFY Amberjack, DIVERSIFY Meager, DIVERSIFY Grey Mullet. We don't know, but we have to try and we have to push for that. So just to briefly reiterate what the species leaders said today. In Meager, we need to look at reducing cannibalism during weaning, because it's a very important issue in the rearing. Sea cage growing, as Alicia said, it's not that we solve a problem, that we have a technique that we believe it will do great things, because it didn't seem to make that big of a deal in the experiments. But we still hear from the farmers that they do have a problem with the growth in the cages, so they still ask us about what will be the most important way of feeding this fish. And as you saw, granulomadosis is still a very, very, very important issue. I don't understand why we haven't solved it yet. It's very difficult, but there's a cost for it. So it's when it becomes, when we find it, it will be very clear. But we need to work on it. In greater Amberjack, as Dr. Babandroulakis said, we need to work on reproduction, because relying on rearing broodstock in cages, of course, is not the way to go. It's not a safe way to go. And as we go into breeding selection and having expensive broodstock, we're not going to keep them in cages. We have to keep them in biosecure facilities. So we do need to study further reproduction in order to allow to succeed with the reproduction in tanks in the Mediterranean, which will then lead, hopefully, to natural spawning, and it will allow us also to look into off-season spawning. Nutrition, of course, we need to do work in all areas, broodstock, larvae, on-growing, because there's no specific diet for Amberjack, as there isn't specific diet for Meager, and there should be. Larval and growing husbandry is important. Pathology, again, as you saw from the presentation of Dr. Katharios, is very important to look into prevention schemes, especially as it relates to parasites, which is a very important issue. Marketing, product development, it's important for every fish. It's important for any product that we put out, and we should try to see what trademarking may do, what specific marketing will do, based on the socioeconomics knowledge that we have acquired in terms of market segmentation, consumer behavior, consumer attitudes, the organoleptics of the different products, the importance or the proposition for each of the product that we have developed. Atlantic halibut reproduction is still an issue when it relates to gamete quality, and it's important to find good, reliable, and affordable markets. We need to improve the stability The newly sequenced genome will hopefully help us in finding some genetic markers for desirable traits. Larval husbandry, we need to increase the general survival and improve development. This is again in Halibut. Nutrition work needs to be done in early weaning of larvae and to decrease the dependence on live feed. And of course, as the industry grows in size, in volume, they will be faced with the issue of cost of fish meal, so alternative raw materials and sustainable raw materials from other sources other than fish meal will become a limiting factor. Avoiding early maturation, this is something that has been done quite successfully in other species, or at least we know how it can be done, and it should be something that we should look into halibut. And for health, there's this new viral disease that is very, very important. It's vertically transmitted and it's difficult to identify until you get the problem. So this is going to be an issue for the future. In Pike Perch, as we heard today, the overall global target is to reduce cost of production, to make the margin of profit more, so that more companies will get into. Improvement of growth through breeding programs, which from what I understand have not been implemented so far. Improvement of feeding, again, there's no specific feed for Pike Perch, which would improve feed conversion ratio. It will reduce cost and will improve margin of profit, and increasing survival during nursery periods, again, because of cannibalism is important as it is for meager. In Wreckfish, we have a lot more work to do in larval rearing, now that we kind of not solved but got a handle on the reproduction, and we seem to have a spontaneous reproduction of 3 broodstocks that we have in Spain. It means that we have a lot of eggs to start implementing more systematic larval rearing trials to get into some large number juvenile production, which will allow different types of rearing, ponds, tanks, cages, and then to start seeing also growth potential, cost of production, growth rates, organoleptic characteristics, and things like this for the market. And it's important also to see if we can identify locations and methods for broodstock development, because it's very, very difficult to get broodstock. We get them usually as juvenile size or small juveniles, because when they become more than 2-3 kilos, they dive into very great depths and it's very difficult to get them. Recently, there have been some more effective collection of broodstock from some companies that get fish for aquaria, that they can find them in floating buoys, in big oceanographic buoys. We have to find some ways, but it seems to be a difficult species to find in most of the areas, which may be good for the aquaculture production, but difficult for broodstock development. And finally, for gray mullet, we need to look into reducing mortality during the first 10 days. Broodstock diet may help in providing the eggs and the larvae during the endogenous feeding with the appropriate nutrients. Looking into other types of prey items may help, like copepods or ciliates. And of course, the grow out is a problem. We don't know how it's going to be solved and what will be required to go into a monoculture in the way that we do with the other species, and whether it would be possible. But it's still a very, very, very good fish, and there's still a lot of other ways that we can promote its culture in the salinas, in the estuaries, in the ponds that are managed by some fisheries associations in the coastal areas, in many locations around the Mediterranean. So until we get into a cage culture of gray mullet, there's other growing methods that we can promote, because it's a very, very good fish. So this is what I had to say to remind you about what we think should be the bottlenecks. Obviously, this will be refined and revisited as we write the final report and we think about what we have achieved and what we have learned, and people read it and give us their opinion. There's also farmers that are starting to produce some of the fish that were never before available, like Amberjack, and they give us feedback. And if you want to take the microphone and give us your opinion, especially the people from outside the consortium, because the ones from within the consortium, we can talk about this again more detailed tomorrow. So I don't want to tire you. We have, let's put 5-10 minutes into this, and let me know if you want to say something. Okay, I don't see a lot of interest. Okay, I won't push you then. As we said, the website is going to remain live for the next few years. We would encourage people from outside the consortium to give us their opinion, to give us their suggestion as to things to look at in a future project or in future research. Many of us are involved in research now, continuing on the basis that we had from DIVERSIFY, and we're looking forward to having a next big project where we can put our heads together and make the next step, hopefully a leap.
Yes, Dinos, I have just few comments because I will not be here tomorrow for the discussion. Of course, by essence, diversification means that we are working with non-domesticated fish. Otherwise, it's not a diversification. And so probably that we have to think also about what is common in all these species. You know, for example, you mentioned the cannibalism. Maybe to think on another way. For the first DIVERSIFY, we came all with the main bottlenecks in each species separately, without taking into account to some extent the bottlenecks of the other groups and other species. Now I think that if we want to continue in a, I would say, DIVERSIFY 2, maybe we should work on what is common as bottlenecks for all species and what is more specific. And probably what is common is that we are working with wild animals without any genetic selection, and probably that the genetic selection will solve already a lot of bottlenecks by the selection. So of course we have to think about what is the most appropriate selection, not only focusing on growth and productivity, but also on the other aspect, behavior, suitability to be reared in captive conditions at high density, etc. Yeah.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, so let's close today's meeting then. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to the people from outside the consortium. I hope that you think that this is a useful project and it will have some results of benefit to your organization and stakeholders. And we'll see all of you from the consortium tomorrow morning here for the financial and scientific reporting.